Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us for our Founders Day celebration of 2021. We are so thrilled to have you here with us this evening, both our in-person audience and our virtual audience. And so our virtual audience knows this is a regular Zoom, so we can see your smiling faces. So if you need to get up and do something or you want to make a funny face, feel free, but be mindful that we can see you. So as we conclude our 20th anniversary year, we thought it only appropriate to continue the celebration of our founders, Carl Kappa, Betty Linnae, and Greg Peterson. We kicked off our 20th anniversary celebration in Founders Day last year with tributes to all three of our founders, and we were thrilled that so many of you were able to join us for that virtually. But tonight, and it's especially fitting that we can do at least part of this in person, we're going to focus primarily on one of our founders, the illustrious Gregory L. Peterson. And hence the seat of honor, which those of you online, hopefully, yes, now you can see it, his throne, the dais. So I am reminded of a quote that is often attributed to Robert H. Jackson. Your job today tells me nothing of your future. Your use of your leisure today tells me just what your tomorrow will be. And we have no greater living embodiment of that principle than Greg Peterson and the Robert H. Jackson Center. It is no exaggeration to say that without his brainpower, community ties, programming ideas, interview prowess, and literal sweat, although hopefully not the blood and tears part, I haven't heard those stories, and on occasion, sheer force of will, this organization would not be here today. So you'll hear some of those stories tonight. And for those in our physical audience as well as our virtual audience, if you are moved to speak as well, there is opportunity for that. So just let me know. For those in the audience, please feel free to come up and take the mic. For those online, it's probably easiest if you raise your hands and we can see who we need to call on. Before we get into that part of the program, though, and because I have a captive audience, I would not be doing my job if I did not remind you that we are in the last few weeks of our fiscal year. So if you have not yet contributed to the annual fund, or you are moved to contribute more, I will not stop you. And if you do not remember how you supported us last year, we are certainly happy to fill you in on that. As a preview, our 2022 program theme is Democracy on Trial. And we'll be taking a look at the pressures on democracy and democratic institutions in the United States and internationally. We look forward to joining us next year for these programs, our tea times, our in-person programs, our webinars in Jamestown, Washington, D.C., London, and Germany. Just a small preview. All right, so for this evening, we have a few recorded messages from people who could not be with us this evening, but we're going to start with someone who has been here since the beginning. I'm going to ask Randy Sweeney to come to the podium, please.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's many of you mentioned, we've had about a 2-year gap in our life here where we haven't seen people. And many of you I haven't seen during the time period, and certainly I'm just delighted that everybody's doing well. So, and Chris and I'd like to certainly thank you for pulling all this together. It's a wonderful opportunity, for the Jackson Center, and certainly for this guy over here who I certainly will call a good friend. It's hard to believe the time that has passed since that day in December. I think I've heard it mentioned so many times, as Greg has made a number of comments about it over the years. And certainly, as Kristen mentioned, we would not be standing here if it wasn't for Greg. I remember many of those meetings early on. I remember right here on the stage, there was a group of us, and I believe it was January of 2001, sat here, and it was cold. There wasn't a lot of heat in this building at that point. And, it was Betty Lene and Carl Kappa. Tom Cardman was here, who was the executive director of the Gebbe Foundation at the time. And as all of you would expect, Betty sort of took charge. She, after Greg had made his spiel, Betty, she said, well, I think, Carl, Tom, I think we all ought to throw in, $500,000. And Carl was not moved by that, but I think caught Tom Cardman a little off. He's got a board of directors to report to, and he didn't necessarily able to make that, that commitment, but certainly they came through later. I had that opportunity, wonderful opportunity, before this building was, I'll call functional. I was the executive director at the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation, which is just across the street. And so some of the early board meetings were held over there. And it was exciting in February 6th, actually, of 2001, when Carl and Betty and Greg signed the incorporation documents for the Jackson Center. A little bit after that, I remember, again, we used to gather back here more than once, and that was at a time when Dan Bratton had joined us. And Dan obviously had recently retired from his role at the Chautauqua Institution. And of course, Dan, with an infinite amount of knowledge about organizations, and especially, infinite knowledge about new organizations, things we should do. And I remember him telling us about, some things that he would suggest ought to be part of the immediate focus. And one of those was, you guys ought to find everyone that knew Justice Jackson, worked for Justice Jackson, broke bread with Justice Jackson, or mowed his lawn. Whoever that person may be, you need to find that person. And he said, because that window of opportunity based on the time period that has passed is coming to a close. Well, I don't need to tell any of you, Greg paid a lot of attention. I think he made that his personal mission, and I know that looking at the archives of the Jackson Center today, they would not be what they are if it wasn't for this guy's tenacity and chasing everybody down he could find. In March of that first year, we again gathered here again. I was looking at some pictures I had, and when we named this theater, the Kappa Theater, that was on March 27th, and according to my records, the purchase of this building wasn't actually finalized until after that in April. So things moved quickly. As I said, Dan suggested that you need to also have some kind of an activity, have an event as soon as possible. Well, thinking of that early part of the year, Greg and thinking of his law days, law days coming up on May 1st of 2001, and wouldn't it be great if we could get Eugene Gerhardt, who's the first biographer of Justice Jackson, here for an event. And I got a chance, Greg asked me to ride along over to Binghamton, and we went over and met with Eugene Gerhardt, just a wonderful guy, gracious gentleman. We got to know his legal assistant, Lorraine Wagner, well. Again, wonderful lady. And Eugene was here on May 1st and made the first speech, in this building. An interesting thing, as he was going down the stairs, some of us remember he tripped, and some of us dove and grabbed him before he actually fell, which wouldn't have been a good situation at all, for sure. But, I'm not going to go through, I'm going to stop right there. I just want to touch on a few of those very early things. And you think about all the people that have walked through the door of the Jackson Center over these 20 plus years. And you know, again, I had the benefit of being part of Greg's ear a lot in the early days. And he would mention a name of someone and realizing how important it would be, what a wonderful thing it would be to have that individual here, be able to interview him, showcase the Jackson Center to the community through these very special individuals. And he would have no idea how to find this person or connect with him. I'm telling you, it didn't take him 24 hours before I would get a call and he'd made that initial connection. It was just unbelievable how he knew how to connect the dots. And it was just fantastic. And for me, in the role I had at the Community Foundation, it was a wonderful experience for me to see, to birth an organization and what it takes to sustain an organization, say, past the first 5 years. It's, new initiatives start, they gain a lot of momentum, they sort of plateau, and many times they lose their momentum quickly. Enough of those stories. I have a couple little side stories I was sharing with Kristen the other day. I'm going back to this first winter of 2001. The one thing about this building was, Raleigh was in bad shape, wasn't it? It had a lot of sins, a lot of things, needed to be addressed. Water was, not going down the outside of the building. Some of it was coming inside the building, just to mention a couple of the issues. But on a cold Saturday morning, Greg, he always knew that I'd be at the foundation working. So he called me and he said, why don't you come on over? I want to go up in the attic. And most of you know on the next level, there's a stairway up into the attic. So we headed up in the attic to do some scavenging. And I don't remember if we found anything too wonderful at that point, but we came down, and again, no heat, cold January, and reached for the doorknob, and it all fell apart. We were locked in the attic. So, as always, I would turn to Greg, who always has his cell phone. Well, it was on the table outside. I didn't have mine either. I don't remember exactly what we did, but we did obviously get out eventually before we were talking about writing our last wills. Maybe they'd find us on Monday frozen on the stairway. But interesting, the things that could happen. Again, my theme seems to be around this attic. I'm going to go a little later in the year. It was October 15th, 2001. Greg had commented, I think it was on a Monday, and he said, we need to go up in the attic and look around, because there was a lot of stuff up there, a lot of dust. There had been a lot of pigeons living up there, so there was a lot of leftover from that, and who knows everything else. But, we were digging around through boxes, seeing a lot of things that related with the Masons who had spent a number of years here. And suddenly Greg comes up with a playbill, Scottish Rite Review, correct? Which was a group that played here, put on community theater type things. And looking down through it, there was a mention of a local actress by the name of Lucille Ball, that had performed on the stage here when she was a local upcoming actress. So I know from last time I checked, he still is hoarding that playbill someplace, either at his office or at home. But the significance of that, October 15th. Well, 50 years to the day before that, October 15th, 1951, was the first airing of the I Love Lucy show. So I say, who believes in fate? But it was that point. I don't know if the rest of you have ever heard Greg mention serendipity. I think that's when you used it probably the first time. And from that point on, we heard that word a great deal. So again, there's so many stories, we could be here all night. As Kristen said, would we be here if it wasn't for Greg? I'm completely convinced we would not. A lot of organizations really need that spark plug, that person that's willing to give all. I remember through the years on a Sunday afternoon, a nice sunny day, I'd be at home enjoying the few weeks we seem to have that are nice, and I'd get a call from Greg, who's in the car heading for some city, someplace for an interview. I mean, that's the kind of dedication you really have to make this what it is today. And he knew how, better than anybody I know, on how to leverage the Jackson Center, Robert H. Jackson as an individual, and leverage it financially too, because that's really the big key. So there was never a challenge, as I said before, never a challenge that was too big or a mountain too high. And I wouldn't know how to define dedication other than putting the name Greg Peterson alongside. Greg, thank you for letting me ride along. It was a great experience, a learning experience. I know we had a lot of fun, so thank you very much.
I promise I'm not going to orchestrate everything, but we did have someone who could not be here with us this evening who sent a message that she asked me to read. Greg, we are sorry that we could not celebrate you and the Robert Jackson Center on its Founders Day. The most wonderful time of the year is also the busiest. It has been quite an incredible journey you have had capturing the life and legacy of Jamestown's native son. Starting with an idea you hatched, it grew into a venue where history meets a healthy exchange of ideas to promote and encourage justice and peace. May future generations be inspired by Robert Jackson's life and be challenged by his works and words. John and I commend you and Cindy on the hard work it took to make the Robert Jackson Center a reality. And now it is time to enjoy new passions and interests. Mom always said, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. Love, John and Becky. Becky is with us virtually, so thank you very much, Becky, for sending along those words. We are going to show one of our virtual, or one of our pre-recorded guests now. So Carol Drake could not be with us this evening. She promised me some stories, so we will see what she has to say.
Hey, Greg, congratulations. I wish we could be here tonight, but, sometimes you do have to go on vacation, and darn, this is one of them. I just have a couple of quick stories that I thought people might enjoy. I know you'll remember, and anybody that was around when I was will remember also, as soon as I start talking about the first one. Everybody knows that you are a great interviewer. You're always on time. You spend hours and hours getting information, putting it in a certain order so someone will feel confident talking to you. And this was supposed to be exactly like that one evening when we were talking about civil rights, and we had a wonderful speaker. She was a very big person in the 60s, and her name was Dorothy Cotton. Well, I think you got out maybe 2 questions that she answered well. And then all of a sudden she stood up and started singing. Juanita Jackson followed. She wanted everybody to sing, so everyone was singing. After that, she was talking, told whatever story she wanted to, and you were sitting there like this, and all I could think of was, you're going to rip up all these pieces of paper and use it like confetti. So that's my first story. My other story is another one that everybody will remember. It's one of my favorites. And the first time that Phil Donahue came, he was here for one of our fundraisers, and you were introducing him. And when you introduced him, which really took quite a while, you ended by saying, and he's one of my biggest fans. In the background, way at the top, Cindy's yelling down, you said it backwards. And you didn't really get that you did that, Phil got up to the stand and said, "No, he did it right the first time. I am one of his biggest fans." So that's what I have. And congratulations again, and I'll see you on the flip side.
All right, I'm going to ask Mr. Kidder to come to the podium, please.
I'm here to basically back up Randy Sweeney, and I don't have a lot to offer, I don't think, in addition to what Randy had to say, except you know, all you folks out there know this guy. You know how he operates, and now you know how the Jackson Center happened. He'll see you downtown on 3rd and Main. He'll see me up at a store in Lakewood at noon. He'll see somebody at Chautauqua that afternoon. And the next day at 4 o'clock, you're in his law office signing a deal. That's the way Peterson works. And that's what Betty and Carl, and so they ran into him. You know, they didn't, I don't think they'd really experienced this before. And all of a sudden, you know, a few $100,000 later, we had a Jackson Center going. And so, Greg, it wouldn't have happened without you in there making it happen. And we owe you a great debt of gratitude for what you've done. I would say another thing about Peterson, and that is that he is a follow-through guy. You know, there's a lot of people that talk, but they don't walk the walk. There's a lot of people that say they're going to do things. There's not that many people that really do things, in my experience of life. And Peterson, Greg Peterson, is a follow-through person. Think of the dog with his teeth in your pant leg. He's got his teeth in the pant leg of this place. He's not going anyplace, okay? But you know, because of that follow-through, when you signed the deal or whatever it was that I just mentioned, the hypothetical, it's just the beginning with Greg Peterson. And it's been a heck of a ride for all of us, I'm sure. And Greg, I wanted to just say thank you. I also wanted to just comment on the words up here, the work left to do. I saw John Barrett over here on the Zoom call, and he's not here to defend himself, but I you know, my view of Robert Jackson in many ways, he's a very pragmatic person. And John sent out not too long ago a letter that he had written to his son Bill, who was in school at the time World War II broke out, and Bill wanted to get out of school and go fight in the military like everybody else. And his dad advised him to stay in school, because once the killing is over, once this war is over, somebody's going to have to help put this stuff back together. And we need to prepare you for that. Well, guess who ended up on his staff at Nuremberg? His son, right? And that's the way I think, you know, Jackson was very pragmatic about things. I've often thought there was another article that we used to have around here called The County Seat Lawyer, I think was the name of the article. And it was about Jackson's views of the importance of little places like the courthouse in Mayville. And, you know, I think he got to Washington. He's on a big scene down there. But he said, hey, we didn't kill people back in Chautauqua County. We had a disagreement. We went to the courthouse. World War II is over. How are we going to go to the courthouse? How are we going to do it? And that mission is still here. World War II is long gone, but a lot of wars have come since then. A lot of problems in the world. There's bad actors out there. There's a bad side to human nature. There's going to be more of this stuff going on. And how do we address the next generation of innocent people that get crushed in something like World War II? Jackson, that's what Jackson's all about, I think. I'll just give you one last personal experience. I was thinking of coming down here tonight. I got caught up in the Vietnam War, and I was in 1969 on patrol up along the Cambodian border. And we had all of the doodads, we had all the tech of the time. We were tracking the enemy coming in from Cambodia, but about half the time we got hit first. I mean, all the technology in the world is not going to help you. And there was the sailors would put logos or statements at certain places on the boat. And one of the places we had was a a shrapnel shield in front of the twin 50 caliber machine guns that were on the front of these boats. And one of them has always stuck with me, and it said, "The judge, the jury, and the executioner." That kid behind those 50s, that's who he was. And what Jackson is saying is, that's not the way it should be. There should really be a judge. There should really be a jury. There should really be justice for people in situations that he faced. And that's a Jackson Center's got an ongoing mission. So anyways, good luck to you, and work left to do. And Peterson, thanks for getting us started.
All right, we have one more recorded statement, and then it is open to the audience if anyone here feels moved to speak. Peggy Morgan could join us for a wee bit this evening, but she had another commitment this evening, so she also recorded a message for you.
Good evening, everyone. I was here earlier to say hello to Greg and to the rest of everyone celebrating our wonderful building and our wonderful organization. But I want to say something special to Greg. I've been associated with the Jackson Center as a volunteer, as a board member, as an officer for years, since 2006. And I've met a lot of remarkable people as a result and seen so many things done. But of all the people I've met, Supreme Court justices, chiefs of the Supreme Court, a prince, notaries of the legal community, you name it. The most remarkable person I've met is Greg Peterson. It's because of him that we have this place. He's seen us through things that any organization that was 120 years old could not rival, and did it all in only 20 years. First of all, 2 major renovations of this beautiful historic building. The one that you're seeing, some of you, for the very first time tonight, a renovation. In addition to that, he's produced books, a film documentary, the attention of the archaeological and anthropological community to the pioneering Jackson family, who were early founders, 18th century founders of our county in Pennsylvania, where he himself was born. 2 Chief Justices have visited this building. Others have come to Warren from the Korematsu trial, the subject of the Norman Rockwell famous painting of the little girl in the white dress integrating the Little Rock School in the time of the Civil Rights Movement. The greatest of these people was Greg Peterson. And I just can't resist being a part of this statement celebrating his career at the Jackson Center. He and his wonderful wife, Cindy, have really been the powerhouse for bringing all the fabulous people that we've all enjoyed here. And the evenings with Mark Russell, the receptions at the Supreme Court of the United States just for Jackson members, the opportunities to travel to Nuremberg, the wonderful members he's brought to our board from the UN, from the community of lawyers in this nation. He's just an asset to the town, an asset to the region, and a special treasure of the Jackson Center. Thank you, Greg, for all you do.
All right. So I understand we have one person in the audience who would like to come up and talk. So while I call Mr. Michael Hill up, I'm going to also, if anyone on screen or anyone else in the audience would like to speak, please just let us know. Mr. Hill, at some point, Michael and I have decided it would be very serendipitous if we got to interview you.
So this feels like a little bit of revenge. I accepted the presidency of Chautauqua Institution, and about a week and a half later, I was in this room meeting a guy named Greg Peterson. And I was told that it was an interview I had to take and to be careful. And I thought, what could he possibly know? That was one of 2 interviews in which Greg Peterson made me cry in this room. He is a master of unpacking the human condition. And I'm a little miffed that I didn't think to dig more deeply, to ask you that uncomfortable question that you have asked countless people in this room, where you think it's just going to be a straightforward interview, and then Greg asks you that moment that makes you reminded that you're a human being and that you had something to contribute that you forgot, or you had something you had dreamed of that didn't happen, and he reminded you to keep dreaming. And how fitting tonight that we honor you in a space in which you have reminded so many human beings that, like Robert Jackson dreamed of a more just society, you have marshaled so many people through this space that you helped create, only to remind them to be human, only to remind them to keep dreaming. How fitting tonight that we honor you for dreaming and insisting that this son of Jamestown not be forgotten in his hometown. I do look forward to that moment where Kristen and I can say, your college roommate said, or I was scouring the college newspaper and found that you once wrote, and you think, gosh, how could that possibly happen? I'm entering my 6th season as president of Chautauqua. You were my first encounter to the Jamestown community, my first interview, and I have to wonder, how the hell did I end up on the Jackson Center board? I would like to believe it's because the example you set in my early days reminded me that to be fully human meant to dream, and to dream meant to think about the audacious that no one could imagine. And how fitting tonight that you get put on a throne in a building in which I'm certain, having known Betty Lene, everyone said at some point, you're crazy. And yet here we are, 20 years later. So Peterson, all I can say to you is we're doing our research. At some point, the ever so nondescript bottle of water that is supposed to make you feel welcome, which you will soon realize means you need to drink it because your mouth is about to go instantly dry because you have found something that we didn't imagine. Your turn is coming, my friend. But tonight I'll simply say, as someone who got welcome to Jamestown on the receiving end of your interview, thank you for reminding us to be human. Thank you for reminding us that to be human is to dream. Thank you for looking around and realizing that to dream is to realize something like this. Cheers, my friend.
Mr. Wortman, I understand you have a few thoughts to share.
Thank you. When you came through the doors this evening, the new entrance, I think the first thing you saw was a bronze portrait bust of Robert H. Jackson. And that portrait bust ties to my first interaction with Greg Peterson when the sculptor Dexter Benedict, who also created the larger than life-size standing statue of Justice Jackson, which now stands outside the Jackson Center, he created the portrait bust that was destined to go to the Truman Library in Independence, Missouri. And in making those arrangements, we invited members of the Jackson Center and Greg Peterson and Julia Craig Hill and Tom Schmidt at the time traveled with us to Independence to present that portrait bust to the Truman Library because they were doing a post-World War II exhibit, and part of that exhibit had to do with the Nuremberg trials. And so it was very appropriate that this portrait bust of Justice Jackson was included. While we were there, in talking with Greg Peterson, we discussed whether or not, and at that time, the statue of Jackson, as you all know, stood somewhere down on the edge of town. And I said, would it be appropriate for the Jackson Center to have a portrait bust of Justice Jackson? And Greg thought that might be a good idea. And so you saw it this evening when you came in. And so that was sort of my first encounter with Greg. In speaking with him, it didn't take long to find out that he was a person of action. And of course, we've heard that repeated numerous times this evening. And many of you have known him for a very long time, and I'm sure you could affirm that he is indeed a person of action. Well, I like to think that I look up to people who get things done. And so earlier this year, and our theme this year was the work left to do, I came to realize that we had work left to do at the Jackson Center itself. And that is the renovation of the rooms on the second floor of the mansion. And their intended purpose is to move the offices all to the second floor and to make the second floor handicap accessible throughout. And so with the approval of the board of the Jackson Center, we now have a project underway to refurbish and repurpose those rooms on the second floor. And at the same time, what we know as the green room on the first floor will become the Founders Lounge. You see where I'm going with this? So the founders of the Jackson Center will be formally recognized in that room. That room that you first come to if you were to come in the front door of the Robert H. Jackson Center. And that will become a public room, and the founders will be properly identified and designated that this will be their special place of honor. And I can only imagine that Greg Peterson will have a prominent place in that room. The board did authorize borrowing $250,000 for this project. We have a contract on the way for the completion of that work beginning next year. And the board, we are very close to having 100% board participation in that funding, but we still need some help. So if you're inclined to participate, Marion and Kristen will be happy to speak with you about that. And we're very excited that this work, which is actually a completion of what was intended some years ago, will be done. And Greg, I'm sure that you will be on hand and will be probably cutting the ribbon to the new Founders Lounge when that does occur. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I feel as if my work with the board has paid off when they also do fundraising for me, so I appreciate that. I will say with the Founders Lounge, though, still no cigars. So I'm just going to put that out there. Professor Barrett, I understand that you have a few words you would like to share.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Good evening, everyone. Just to clarify Don's remarks, I want to make sure no one thinks that Greg is going to be entombed in the front vestibule of the Jackson Center. At least not anytime soon, because he continues to be such a vital life force for the Jackson Center. And over the 20 years where I've been, maybe I've been the dog with my teeth in his pants leg, part of this adventure, we've had some crazy, wonderful experiences. I've been sitting in that room with him in the early days when the lights exploded and the power went out. I've been with him in Nuremberg as the guest of a sweet, if slightly confused elderly woman who wanted to make sure that we knew about Robert Jackson committing a murder in her front yard. I saw Greg Peterson somehow pull off the naming of a federal courthouse in Buffalo, New York after Robert Jackson, which was an incredibly complicated feat of political navigation. But what I want to sort of attach to him is a label that actually comes from Justice Felix Frankfurter, and it was something that he attached to his dear friend Robert Jackson. He said that Jackson embodied Jamestown jurisprudence. And from Felix Frankfurter was a bit of a bar, at least to some degree, because Frankfurter was a Harvard law professor before he became a Supreme Court justice, was a very erudite, accomplished scholar of the law, and was learned in all the formal senses. And Robert Jackson, his dear pal and intellectual counterpart, of course, never went to college and barely went to law school and came from this obscure region, not New York City and Cambridge, Massachusetts and Washington, D.C., but they ended up in the same place. And what Frankfurter said Jackson embodied was Jamestown jurisprudence, which meant not getting stuck on the fancy, theoretical, the label level stuff, but being pragmatic, valuing the people, understanding the task at hand, and getting things done. And if I have to sort of encapsulate everything that Greg Peterson is, it's all of those things. It's Jamestown jurisprudence. He's a very good lawyer. He's a very sophisticated businessman. He's a very entrepreneurial spirit. He's a self-taught historian and videographer and on-camera performer and global convener. But in addition to and underneath all of those things, he's very pragmatic. He's very practical. He gets things done and he values the people. And it's really just been a privilege to get to be a colleague and a friend and a beneficiary of somebody with that incredibly special skill set. So Greg, congrats on this first 20 years, and I look forward to the decades ahead.
Please, Mr. Perley.
Did you hear what he just started off with?
I did.
But, I have to say something. Did you hear my whole point? This is
No.
equally scary. No, I wouldn't have missed it.
So, my name is Mike Perley. I'm an attorney in Buffalo. And 9 years ago, I didn't know Greg Peterson, but he's now my friend, and I can tell you why. I buy 100 books a year from him for high school students from the Jackson Center. So I've paid for his friendship, but what I've really found is a partner in an enterprise that we have in Buffalo that would not have succeeded, would not have lasted into a second year if Greg Peterson hadn't been on the other end of a phone call from Judge Scretany. A buddy of mine, colleague of mine, Hillary Banker, and I had this idea that we would put a program together for high school students. And we would enlist Judge Scretany as federal court judge, very interested in education, and we had no earthly idea what to do next. Judge Scretany said, "Why don't you call Greg Peterson?" We ran 7 years in a row until COVID hit. This program came to life because Greg understood how we should reach out and touch people. We really didn't know. A couple of years back, the Bar Association awarded the Jackson Center, the American Board of Trial Advocates chapter in Buffalo, and Judge Scretany with a Liberty Bell Award. It would never have happened if Greg Peterson hadn't been in the room. We are forever indebted.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask you to come to the podium?
I still know what the protocol is.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you all for being here tonight. And if there's anything that I have learned tonight, it's that for the last 20 years, every time we've walked into the Jackson Center, you've been shaken down for money. And we can thank Greg to start, and then Kristen and the rest of the team. But in all seriousness, I'm here tonight to present Greg with an honor on behalf of the city. But before I do that, I was sitting in the seats here and I was thinking about the first time I came to the Jackson Center. And I don't think I've even told Greg this story, but the first time I was here was actually for a law day. And I was doing a mock trial while I was in high school. It was Little Red Riding Hood versus the Big Bad Wolf. And it was really an incredible experience. And I was thinking about how this institution has been here since I have grown up, and how it has become such a part of the fabric of not only the city of Jamestown, of the county, but as I travel the state and I travel the world, people know the Jackson Center. They know not only Robert H. Jackson, but the work that is being done here. And that is all thanks to the work that Greg and team have started way back when, 20 years ago. So as mayor and a new mayor, it's always my privilege to be able to honor our distinguished individuals across the city of Jamestown. And on behalf of the city of Jamestown, I'm here to present Greg with a certificate of commendation in recognition of his outstanding work as co-founder of the Robert H. Jackson Center and interviewer extraordinaire. We put this on the certificate for you, Greg. Therefore, I, Edward A. Sundquist, mayor of the city of Jamestown, wish to thank Gregory Peterson for his service and dedication to the Jamestown community and urge all of you to do the same. Greg, thank you for everything that you have done.
We also have a small token of appreciation for Greg. Honestly, the amount of appreciation and gratitude that we feel could never be expressed in something physical. It would take way too much room up. So this is a paltry stand-in, but something that will fit on your desk. So interview extraordinaire seems to be one of the themes of this evening. And this token of our appreciation is dedicated to Greg Peterson, co-founder, board chair, board member, and interviewer extraordinaire, with appreciation from the Jackson Center board and staff. Now, Greg, we do have a couple of minutes if you would like to say a few words. I know you have nothing prepared because my hope is this was actually a surprise for you this evening. But would you like to say a few words? And it's like a literal 3 minutes.
2 minutes. You got 2 minutes left. First of all, let me just shout out, this all doesn't happen without my wife, Cindy, who, she was right there in lockstep through this all, not only listening to the craziness and the crazy ideas, as all of you did at various points, but nodding, at least acquiescing to this and being an active participant, hostess, with people who stayed at our house and through the last many, many years of our entire lives together, but most importantly, the 20 years of this whole aspect. And Cindy. And I really do have to pause for a second. Everybody here, by the way, I have so many stories, and so many memories popped in as they were talking about them, but I'll refrain for another day. But I do have to call out my law firm, Phillips Lytle. My law firm, Phillips Lytle, if they had not permitted me to do this and to kind of recognize that it had a value to the community and a value to the firm, this wouldn't have happened. I would not have been allowed the time, the energy, the effort, and they supported me in many, many ways with their own talents internally. So to Phillips Lytle, I got to just publicly shout out for that fact. And as I look through this and pause and remember Founders Day. This is Founders Day. This all happened at my office, and those in attendance were Carl Kappa, and Betty Linnae, and the Gebby Foundation through Tom Cardman. Phil Morris, by the way, also was one of those people who was a muse. Often kind of Phil gets lost, but he was one of those guys that provided some intellectual support throughout this whole process. And yes, as Randy Sweeney so appropriately mentioned, that it was the three of them. Perhaps they didn't know where this was all going to go. Neither did I. But with Carl Kappa and Betty both committing right there where the seats where Cindy is sitting, $500,000. And poor Tom Cardman, he's sitting right over there where Judge Cass is right now. And simply, I looked at him and I said, I didn't know this was coming. They reacted emotionally. And to Cardman, he said, well, I got to get a board approval. But to the Gebby Foundation, they stepped up and did something I didn't fully appreciate at the time, but gave us unrestricted $500,000 right up front. So here this place, which needed a lot of help, was all of a sudden encouraged by three people. And by the way, there was no strategic plan. Randy Sweeney, who lives in the world of strategic plans, somebody's got to submit. If I have to go to Tori Ergang and seek money from the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation, Kristen McMahon and Marion have to give a nice long discussion. But we got all this money without anything. And I remember Tom Cardman, I don't know if I'm talking out of class, saying after we got our check for $500,000, simply saying, can you send us a letter at least explaining what it is you're doing? So they can pad the file. And I look at so many foundations, the Community Foundation, Barclay Wellman, Barclay, and this is going to exceed the 3 minutes. But, when you look around and you see, frankly, all of the decorations, you walk in here, our first wave under Raleigh Kidder's direction, and with the support of a lot of people, including Albany, a lot of people in Albany, and for the federal government assisted. But it was Barclay, frankly, who had the vision, together with Raleigh and Betty Linnae. Betty Linnae, she was very much a factor, as we all know, and Sarita Weeks. Let's not forget Sarita. That really, and it stood the test of time. We're here 20 years later. 20 years later, Barclay. I mean, the reality, I pause and I look at this. This is the stuff that stood up for 20 years, a lot of traffic, a lot of activity. But that's the scale of interest that a lot of people did. And I could tell stories for virtually everybody who's in this room here. And I'm going to be embarrassed when I come home tonight, and my wife will remind me. Pardon? Oh, yeah, as we were... As Carol Drake was talking about, the Phil Donahue story, which is so true when I made that faux pas. And my wife reminded me, she did again. So as I was going down the row, thank you, but I'll fast forward. It was really, this is really quite a story. I stood there, I sat there and I looked around and there's these stanchions, candles, and it reminds me of a Masonic meeting. And you must know this was the Scottish Rite Consistory. The Scottish Rite Consistory Masons, most of them 32nd and 33rd degrees, like Judge Willard Cass. But this was the cute story. We met on December 14th, Founders Day, and Carl and Betty and Tom Cardman sort of tapped me on the head because we did not think about this building. That was not what we talked about. We talked about a little building next to the town club. Those little narrow buildings that were there. The Lucy Desi Center had something, or Lucille Ball, that's all it was then. And we were going to have the other one next to it, just put some pictures up. And a lot of things happened. Bill Winchester, others, the Masons, and Stanley Weeks called me. Stanley Weeks called me and said, Greg, you interviewed me about Robert Jackson. If you're interested in doing something about Robert Jackson, think of the Scottish Rite Consistory because we're going to sell it. We're going to sell it. So I walked up here and talked to Mr. Winchester. He didn't know me from Adam. And I said, what are you doing? He goes, we have a contract. We have a contract. And I go, I just had met with Betty and Carl, and they thought, maybe, good luck, Greg, on finding out something, but let us know. So there was a little bit of a panic that maybe this, with a theater, where we are right now is what's intriguing to me and to us was, this is unique in Jamestown, to have a 200-seat theater for education purposes. So I called Betty, which one always does when all else fails. Called Betty Linnae, say, hey, guess what? There's a contract on this building which you don't even know about, what this is all about. But we may, in fact, get, we may lose this. So she did what Betty Linnae would do. Call Judge Willard Cass, Mason extraordinaire, and said, Judge, she relayed the story. We need help. Can you stop that? Now, I don't know what really happened, but all I can suggest that somehow a well-placed phone call from Judge Willard Cass to the Masons-to-be, who were considering the sale of this place, led to a Masonic injunction. I'm not sure that's a term, but it happened. It happened. And that then permitted us the time, Judge, and I know I've told the story, but benefit of everybody else, to then make a real serious pitch to all the Masons, and the rest you know is the story. We won the day, and here we are 20 years later. But for that intercession by Judge Willard Cass, based on a phone call from Betty Linnae, and Floss, I'm sure you've heard this story, but that really was an opening. Now, the other thing you didn't know, and I'm giving you a secret, is that I signed the contract to buy this building in my own name. There was no Robert Jackson Center. You heard from Randy Sweeney. We didn't exist till like April. This was back in January. So I never told my wife that. That, in fact, I had this contract that they signed subject to approval of the Masons. So, Cindy, tonight, congratulations. You almost own this individually. So, thank God for Betty and Carl and the Gebby Foundation and many of the other foundations who are all represented here who provided tremendous support. I mean, tremendous support then, now, and hopefully in the future. That's the plug. And I want to just say thank you. It's really is been a remarkable 20 years, and there'll be many more. As Randy Sweeney was talking about how, these particular not-for-profits, they have some degree of energy early on. They go up, they pause, and often go like this. With the support of everybody in this room and everybody who's on this here, and I'm looking now as to the who's who, and I thank you so much for all of your support, intellectually, financially, emotionally, and many times calling me and say, buck up, Greg, you'll be okay. We're here today, 20 years later. We've gone through what is the normal cycle of here and down. We've gone here and just gone up. And we have tremendous leadership now with Kristen and Marianne and Sherry, and a board like no other. They've really, really ranched it up, and I could go on, and Kristen's going like this, and so I will stop at this moment and say thank you, everybody, for coming to Founders Day. This is a wonderful celebration, and I am really, really touched on all fronts. Thank you.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I tried to keep it to an hour, so if anyone wanted to share thoughts that they did not have an opportunity to do so, please feel free to record and send to me, and we will make sure that Greg gets it. info@roberthjackson.org is the easiest email address, so no one has to spell my last name. So thank you all very much. Happy Founders Day, and we look forward to seeing you December 14th next year.